Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the official Oscarina nomination coverage for The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. This is the third installment in the Zelda series, the first two of which launched on NES in the 80s, all developed and published by Nintendo. Making the jump to Super Nintendo, Link to the Past returns to the original overhead perspective of the first entry and involves protagonist Link as he explores the regions of Hyrule on a quest to save 7 maidens from the evil Ganon. My name's Mitchell, and I'll be your host for the evening. Here with me is fellow Oscarina voter Randy. Randy, thanks for coming along.
I'm happy to be here. I'm a longtime Zelda fan.
Me too. So this is we're aptly chosen, I feel. Zelda mixes adventure, exploration, and dungeon crawling with a heroic narrative. It is up for a total of 6 awards, which include Best Pixel for 91, Best Gameplay, Discovery, and Expression, Best Level Design, Best Art Direction, Best Musical Theme for Power of the Gods, and Best Sound Atmosphere. Thoughts to say for Zelda, being a long-time fan?
I can say that for me, the pinnacle of Zelda is definitely exploration and discovery. So I like that it's up for that because I think Zelda does best. It's finding cool little secrets, going to explore, hitting things with your sword, seeing what happens.
Yeah, that's a good point to start with, because so when I played through this game for like the recording and the awards, it was actually last on my list. It wasn't a game I grew up from my childhood, which is kind of weird. I actually don't know why that happened, because I usually had most Zeldas. I had the first two, so they were very nostalgic. But this one I somehow missed, and when I first played it, it was in college. And it didn't quite strike a chord with me as much as I think it did a lot of other people. And so I was kind of like meh on it for a while. And then when I replayed it for the awards, it was sort of in the broader context of everything else that I experienced. And the main thing for me was just that Link to the Past is just so structurally sound. There's not really any part of the game that was thoughtlessly thrown in, or that's glitchy, or that just doesn't have a purpose, or you feel like it's too short, or it doesn't have enough variety. It's like you can't really make any of those claims about it. And so the discovery and expression point really carries a lot of weight. When you're going from, in between dungeons to like collect some heart pieces or find some new items or power-ups, it's very inventive, the situations they will come up with to give you new items. Even so much as like your first empty bottle you buy from a merchant who's like, here, hold it up above your head so everybody can see, helps with business, which is just like a funny touch because it's also just how Link holds it up, like to show the player, and so they have kind of it's just kind of tongue-in-cheek in that way. But there's like another guy, like the next one is found like under the bridge of Hyrule, and when you go into there, there's just like a guy sleeping there, and he's got a little tent and a campfire set up, and he's snoozing. And so it's just, all they needed was a treasure chest, right? And instead they kind of like fleshed out like, oh, this is the land of Hyrule, so there's a guy here, he gives you an empty bottle, or oh, here's a little mini game you can play to get a heart piece. It's just really, I don't know. That part brings on a lot of charm, and I think it adds more staying power than everyone maybe realizes.
And that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about that sense of discovery. It's interacting with the world and realizing that parts of it really feel alive. They feel more interesting. It's not just a treasure box. It's something more.
Yeah, and I think this is something that I've been thinking about more recently with Zelda as well. Like the first two are kind of where my impression of Zelda comes from, because I was just so young. Those are the first two I experienced, and so in addition to the nostalgia, it's just like they're always kind of circled back to those two entries. But I think the more Zelda games I play and the more I familiarize myself with them, the more it seems clear that it's kind of like people play and enjoy Zelda for something more than that, and it's really wrapped up in this idea of discovery, where things are more than what they seem. Even if like the item you get is just like some rubies at the end, it's not necessarily the end, because it was fun, just the process of it happening. Like there's the the mini game where you have to shoot your bow and arrow, and there's like the little guy who's running the game, he'll like slap the his drum whenever you land a target, so he's like cheering you on. He's like, yeah, you scored a point. He's kind of like concocted this scenario on his own accord. And so it's very creative, and it's endlessly that way. Just when you think that you've discovered everything in the game, you'll find like, oh, here's the Zora King and he wants some artifact, or here's a great fairy fountain, and then she can power up your weapons if you throw them. And it's just like, man, like, is it ever going to end? And it's like, it's a very deep well.
There's always something new around every corner or every hole or whatever. Or rock.
Yeah. Yeah, like its depth is very much, it's not in like each individual activity, it's in the breadth of activities and things that you encounter.
And I don't know how relevant it'll end up being, but I actually started with the Zelda that comes after this, Link's Awakening. So this one and the previous two were ones that I kind of missed. And
Gotcha.
I only played going back as an adult, and you can really see the foundations of the series, I think, really coming together more concretely in this game.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because the first two, I mean, I love them to death, but like this one, like there's it's an uncountable number of games you can encounter that copy this sort of style and the perspective, but even just like the art, kind of jumping into that a little bit, like everything is very, very readable. You can tell, oh, that's an enemy, that's an item, and it's all very attractive, and it's just very simplistic.
I will say something I really like about Zelda in its art direction is it's not afraid to be both like super precious and cutesy, and also really, really creepy, and like in the same game.
Yeah.
Like, your life is hearts. That's adorable. Link is always super cute. You know, he's not this big tough guy. He's a cute little elf.
Right. Well, even when he's trying to like pick up a rock or something, you see him just straining over the effort. Yeah.
He's so precious. He's trying so hard. Look at the little guy go, you know?
Yeah.
But then you'll get like stuff that's like honestly kind of horrifying in the game.
Yeah, you get like, you get the skeletons and the mummies. There's even the hand guy. Like, he originates from this game where he's just a hand coming out of the ground. Yeah, and it's just like, he's like, hey, you want a secret? And it's like, what is this?
Yeah, creepy. I think it's based on Japanese mythology stuff, but yeah, that I've had many childhood nightmares of that scenario.
Yeah, I mean, it is worse than Majora's Mask because it's clearly the bathroom, and that's the last thing you want to envision when you enter that sacred space.
Ugh. He's so creepy.
Yeah. There's also places where the game will push itself a little bit. Most of the time, it kind of looks the way that it does, but whenever there's, let's say, a transition from going from the light world to the dark world, it has this really cool, like, warped effect that happens. Or when you're going for the Master Sword, the forest is really foggy, and so it really does a nice job of creating a nice effect there. And so it just does, it's just kind of perfect in the way that it will bend the rules a little bit when they know something important is happening. And so I like that a lot with the art direction. It's not quite that simple. And the other thing, and this is going to kind of link us into level design, is that in a lot of the stages, there's like multiple layers, and you can see both layers. So you'll often be in a perspective where you're walking on like rafters or something like that, and you can look down and see the floor below, and then enemies will be like walking under you. You'll see a chest, and you'll be like, well, how do I get down there? And sometimes you can jump, sometimes you can't. But it's just really good that all of that is crystal clear to the player. And it also makes it really dynamic because in that first game, you would be locked into just like, well, everything has to be flat. Like, nothing is above anything else. It's all linear, it's all wide. And then in the second game, you do have levels, but you don't really have so much of a map, and it's side-scrolling. So you're kind of limited with what you can do. And this one takes those two concepts and sort of shoves them into one space. And it works great, and they do a lot of creative stuff with it.
Actually, a really interesting thing to point out that it kind of blends the first two. I didn't catch that.
I didn't until we started recording, so fancy that. You know, NES is like hard mode and it's arcade difficulty. And something that Zelda was really pivotal in doing was that it shifted the perspective. Like, Link to the Past is still tough, and you still die a fair bit. I mean, I died a good, like, 11 times throughout my whole playthrough. Probably a lot more than that. And the game even keeps track of how many deaths that you have, and it'll tell you at the end, like, how many times you died, which I think is pretty funny. But you can, you know, pack berries in bottles or take potions with you. And the fairies don't heal you very much, actually. They're purely just for revival's sake, because you only get, like, 6 hearts or something out of them. But,
It's different.
despite that... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, that's just a little bit different, that's all. They usually, like, heal you a lot, too.
Yeah, but I kind of liked that trade-off. I thought it was good because I could stock up on potions, but I had to make sure that I was, you know, drinking them and not just waiting until my health got too low. So you have to watch carefully how much damage enemies are doing to you, otherwise you run that risk. But it's also good to just have a fairy or two because that can keep you alive, but it can't heal you fully. So it's a nice dilemma that it puts you in. It reminds me of the original in a lot of ways, because the original, that's, you kind of want potions with you so you can go into a dungeon, and that basically extends your stay there to keep exploring and investigating. But the first one's really hard from a combat perspective, and this one, it is too, but I would stress that it's also something that, like, a kid could beat if they really put their mind to it and just packed up enough supplies and then went into each dungeon. And you do make, you know, those points of progress where you get the dungeon item or you get the boss key. And so things are divvied up in a really nice way so that it's not so overwhelming and you don't need to be perfect to do it right. Because some of those old dungeons, you really do need to try to make it in one go if you can. I mean, even if you bring a potion.
But yeah, and that can be pretty hard, you know? I definitely, as a kid, didn't always have time to just complete a whole dungeon. Sometimes I would have to take a break and come back, and that can be challenging.
Yeah, it's a tough game, but it's also, I think it was kind of pivotal in just communicating to, like, other designers, like, look, these games don't need to be so relentlessly difficult. They can be somewhere in the middle. And, you know, it's okay to give the player, like, an easy heart container or heart piece here and there. It's okay to kind of give them those things as a little tutorial. Because even, like, the bomb placement, too, like the cracked walls, at first, I was like, you know, they kind of give away the secret, because the whole novelty of the first game was that you would have this social element where you would ask friends and kids at school, oh, where can you get some extra
Oh, I remember those days, that's all.
Yeah. Yeah, and, like, it makes there a fun social element, and that was really innovative. But I do think that there's something commendable going on here, where it actually only shows the really obvious cracked walls in the first area where you're rescuing Zelda from the dungeons of Hyrule Castle. After that point, they're actually decently well hidden, and I'll sometimes be, like, on my way out the room, and I'll be like, oh, wait a minute, I think there's a bomb over there, and then I run over, and sure enough, I can get a bomb blast through a wall. And it's just, that felt rewarding, like, that really worked for me, because it was still, like, the clue that I knew to be on the lookout for, but it was kind of, whether it was, like, dark lighting or something like that, it wouldn't make it super obvious. It would make me work a little bit for it. If I was paying attention, I could catch it. And sometimes there'd be a cracked wall and you just can't blow it open with a bomb, and then it would be like, huh, so I have to solve something else. And so it would kind of trip you up a little bit. And that kind of eliminates the frustration of having to burn every bush.
For sure. I personally appreciate signposting like that a lot, especially as someone with limited time to play nowadays. It's like, okay, like, give me at least a little something to go off of, or at least let me know walls can be blown up, you know?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with just teaching the player in a subtle way like that what you can do with the tools that you have. Did you have anything more to say about the level design or the gameplay, or the? I think we've kind of covered those two and the art pretty well.
Yeah, we covered them pretty well.
Okay. Oh, one other thing I did want to mention about the art is Link's freaking pink hair.
Okay.
His hair, it's hot pink.
Yeah. This is probably the most feminine we get Link, at least in terms of just color palette, and I love it. I'm here for it. It's adorable.
Oh, I super down. Like, now that because, like, once you, like, I remember even as a kid, I was like, oh, his hair's pink. I wonder why it's pink, and I couldn't wrap my head around why it was. And nowadays, I just think it's hilarious. I think I don't know what they were thinking, but it can't change now. He has to have pink hair.
Legitimately, until I saw like the art book and like the cover and stuff, I didn't know that wasn't a girl. I was just like, oh, okay, Link's a girl in this one. Cool. That makes sense.
It honestly really does, because the whole mythos of Zelda is that it's like the same thing happening like over and over, like just generations past. So the only thing that's different is that Link would be a girl this time instead of a guy. Like it totally works, and they ought to do it at some point, I think. Or honestly, just let us play as Zelda. Like, her name is in the title. Like, come on.
Right? I think we do get to in one DS game, but it's not very often.
I want like a big landscaping adventure. I mean, I'm getting off topic now.
No, I feel you. I feel you. Girl power Zelda. Let's go.
Alright, so we've got a couple more categories to cover. So one is for best sound atmosphere. I don't think there's too much to say on here rather than just to listen, but I will say that, you know, part of the charm really comes through with the sound, like the noise you hear when you pick up like a rupee, or when you're like slashing enemies and then they like explode. There's just lots of good little noises that collect everything and put it together into a neat package. So they mix really well with the art direction as well, and that's kind of the other advantage it has there.
I think the item finding kind of sound is just like etched into my brain forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also productive too, because when you hear it in the game, that's like a clue that something has been unlocked. Oh yeah, because like one of the dungeons in particular, it has this really cool way in which you solve it, in that half of it is in the overworld. Well, I guess most of it's in the dungeon itself, but it's in the Lost Woods in the Dark World. And so what has to happen is you like are falling into holes, and then that will take you to like one room of the dungeon, and then you might find a key or something, and then you climb out, and then you have to find another entrance point to the same dungeon. And so then you're running around the forest trying to find these different entry points. And so it's really cool, like layered design on top of the already layered design it was doing already. And the sound is really important for that, because it's kind of like the art has to communicate clearly where those levels are, and then the sound matching the sort of style that the art is going with keeps that energy fresh and lively.
Oh yeah, for sure. Zelda has just such a distinct quality and style of sound that just you instantly hear it and you're like, oh, this is a Zelda game. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's one of those games that I think if you just heard the sounds, you'd be interested to play it. And like
yeah.
you said, it's iconic. Like you'd recognize immediately, like, hey, this sounds like something I know.
And you can ask me about my Oscarina later, but
yeah. I think I'll probably leave our sentiments for Power of the Gods to the end. So is there anything else you'd like to say about it in terms of its nomination for Best Pixel?
no, I think it's important too that it got a bunch of nominations because it's so iconic and very much I would say really the foundation of just a super expansive and amazing series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even today, like if you go onto like the Switch eShop and just start browsing around, you're gonna see Link to the Past phones, and it's Link to the Past in particular. And this one helped pave the way for Link's Awakening and anything in this 2D Zelda style. So yeah, it's kind of one of those games that if you've not played it yet and you're curious about game design, you really owe it to yourself to check it out, because I think you won't be disappointed, and I think you'd be surprised at how much novelty is put into it. And they, like I said before, you know, collectively they add up together to really make for a nice package. So for Power of the Gods, this is up for Best Musical Theme. I'm going to play it at the end, but there's a few things I think that are worth commenting about it. This song just gives me chills every time, and I think that's probably the best argument I could probably lay in for it.
It's beautiful. It really has this just magical quality to it.
Mm-hmm. And you pick it up, it comes at you right at the end of the game. So you've defeated Ganon, you've defeated everything. And so it's your crescendo to the experience, and so it's a perfect compliment for that moment when you confront the Triforce, and then you touch it and get to make a wish.
I think it also has like it relates to the original title of this game because this game got its title kind of I think censored or translated differently.
You're right. Yeah, the original title is Triforce of the Gods.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah. It was I guess they changed it again, the censorship problem, because they preferred to have they didn't want to use religious connotations. But honestly, Link to the Past doesn't really make any sense because you don't go back in time, really. I mean, you sort of do, but it's mostly just the Dark World.
Okay, maybe the Dark World is hinted to be in the past in the translation. I don't know.
I think there is some line of text somewhere in the story where they kind of communicate that, like, oh yeah, this is like the past, but it's also like an altered past, so I don't know. I think Triforce of the Gods would have been a perfectly acceptable title. But
So
it's
what I'm
just, yeah.
hearing is they translated it to like this is the bad timeline. Okay, this is 2020. This is the bad timeline.
Yeah, it's just in like the actual Zelda lore where it breaks off and there's like a good timeline and then there's a bad one.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you guys are curious to play Link to the Past yourself, and you should, there is of course the Super Nintendo version, but it's also available on Nintendo Switch Online. It's also on the Super Nintendo Classic Edition if you happen to have that. Thank you, Randy, and ladies and gentlemen, for joining me tonight. Zelda: A Link to the Past is up for 6 awards, including Best Pixel. If you're a voter, I hope you'll consider it, and if you're a viewer, let us know how you think it will perform. You can look forward to seeing the winners at the award ceremony this October.
Thank you all so much.
And our closing sentiment: if Zelda: A Link to the Past wins Best Pixel, it will show the importance of foundational design that shifted the paths gaming would tread for generations.